West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Well, I loved Buffalo the first day I arrived there in 1988 with New York's senior Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who was running for re-election with polls showing him headed for winning 68% of the vote, which gave him enough confidence to allow me to work on his re-election campaign when I knew next to nothing about politics. I made many return trips to Buffalo over the years of working in the Senate with Senator Moynihan, who loved Buffalo long before I did. It is New York State's second largest city, a city born as a trading post before colonial governments were formed. To that long, rich history, we must now add the deadliest mass murder in the history of the city of Buffalo, which happened on Saturday. When the headline flashed across my phone on Saturday, I made some educated guesses about the murderer and the murder that were soon confirmed. A white supremacist teenage boy equipped with the most effective weapons for mass murder aimed at black people. Just like the mass murderer who shot and killed 9 black people in Mother Emanuel Church in Charleston, South Carolina in 2015. And those assumptions that I made are exactly what this story turned out to be.
The Justice Department has stated publicly that it is investigating the matter as a hate crime, racially motivated act of white supremacy and violent extremism. As they do, we must all work together to address the hate that remains a stain on the soul of America. The hearts are heavy once again, but a resolve must never ever waver.
How many more times during his presidency will Joe Biden have to say that? We know it will happen again. We know with the number of dead might be higher next time. And we know that between now and the next time this happens, nothing will be done to reduce in any way the chances of this happening again. 10 dead this time. Roberta Drury, age 32, Margus Morrison, age 52, Andre McNeil, age 53, Aaron Salter, age 55, Geraldine Talley, age 62, Celestine Cheney, age 65, Hayward Patterson, age 67, Catherine Massey, age 72, Pearl Young, age 77, Ruth Whitfield, age 86. They are all dead tonight because they are black and they were at the Tops Market on the east side of Buffalo. The current senior senator from New York loves Buffalo and has visited Buffalo more than any New York senator before him.
Because I know this community. Years ago, I worked hard to bring that grocery store to the east side of Buffalo because the community deserved a full-fledged supermarket. It was a much-needed oasis in what was then a total food desert.
The mass murderer used zip code information to find the upstate New York neighborhood most densely populated with black people. Syracuse, a city of 148,000 people, is 80 miles north from the white Republican upstate neighborhood where the murderer lived. 29% of the people of Syracuse are black, but the mass murderer decided that he could get a higher body count at the Tops supermarket in Buffalo, and so he bypassed Syracuse and nearby Rochester, whose population is 39% black, and drove the 200 miles to Buffalo. We don't know why the murderer is alive tonight. The police had every legal right to shoot him on sight with a gun in his hand when they cornered him in the store, but they talked him into dropping his gun to the floor, and then they arrested him. One of those police officers had been on the street with the unarmed 18-year-old Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. Maybe Michael Brown would be alive tonight. For some reason, unarmed black teenagers and men seem more likely to be shot and killed by police than white supremacist teenage mass murderers with guns in their hands. On the Senate floor today, New York senior senator said something that could get him fired if he were a public school teacher in Florida now.
The weekend shootings is part of an ugly pattern, one that dates to the earliest days of this nation. Racism has always been, and unfortunately still is, the poison of America. The original sin of slavery and the decades of racial terror, discrimination, separate but equal, white supremacy and bigotry that followed, unfortunately, continue to exert poisonous influence on our society.
Senator Schumer focused on the support for the poisonous thinking that the mass murderer received from the Fox channel owned and operated by the Australian immigrant Rupert Murdoch.
Online, the shooter proudly professed himself as a neo-fascist, white supremacist, anti-Semite. His views, shared extensively online, embraced a dangerous ideology known as, quote, the Great Replacement, unquote, which asserts that a conspiracy exists to replace white Americans with immigrants and people of color. The same hatred that motivated the shooting at a Walmart in El Paso. The same poison that possessed the shooter of a synagogue in Pittsburgh. The same bigotry that murdered 8 people in Atlanta last year. And the same evil that took the lives of 9 worshipers at a church in Charleston. It was the same evil at play this Saturday in the beloved city of Buffalo, New York. Not long ago, views like replacement theory were only found in the darkest places in deranged minds. Replacement theory and other racially motivated views are increasingly coming out into the open and given purported legitimacy by some MAGA Republicans and cable news pundits. It's a message that has also found a special home in several right-wing outlets, and on one cable news channel in particular, Fox News. Tucker Carlson has spewed rhetoric that echoes replacement theory at least 400 times on his show since 2016. It is not enough for outlets like Fox News to simply condemn Saturday's violence and condemn shooters' racist views and then return to their regularly scheduled programming. Fox News and their hosts need to actually stop spreading dangerous ideas like replacement theory on their shows.
They will stop the minute Rupert Murdoch tells them to stop. It's as simple as that. Every minute spent talking about the TV hosts on Fox is a minute that hides the true villain of the piece. Rupert Murdoch is the billionaire puppeteer. In 1995, when Rupert Murdoch was planning to create a cable news channel, he had never heard of any of the people who are now his most prominent hosts. But Rupert Murdoch knew what he wanted Fox to do from day one, and Fox has always done and said exactly what Rupert Murdoch wants. The headline of Renee Graham's Boston Globe piece says, with the Buffalo massacre, Fox News has blood on its hands. Again. The article mentions Tucker Carlson 9 times and his predecessor Bill O'Reilly once, but the article does not mention Rupert Murdoch under the title Fox News has blood on its hands. Fox News doesn't have hands, but Rupert Murdoch does. White supremacist mass murderers in this country who take encouragement from Fox want to, among other things, stop immigration to this country, as does Fox, a company owned and operated by an immigrant who has done more damage to this country in the 21st century than any immigrant in the world has done to any other country in the 21st century. Rupert Murdoch built a network with the sole purpose of electing Republicans. There could be no President Trump without Rupert Murdoch's support. And every day that Fox has been in existence, Rupert Murdoch has supported the Republican Party's abject fealty to the National Rifle Association. And so it is thanks to Rupert Murdoch, as much as it is any Republican president, that America's mass murderers are still what they have always been, the very best equipped mass murderers in the world. Rupert Murdoch has made sure of that. Every American mass murderer can thank Rupert Murdoch for all the murder tools that Rupert Murdoch has made sure they are able to easily buy over the counter. No one should waste their breath on the men in makeup at Fox when Rupert Murdoch is responsible for everything they say and do that helps shape the thinking of white supremacist mass murderers.
It is Super Tuesday, the 17th of May of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, the perfect dish for Super Tuesdays. Get you hearty and hale, and get out there. If you haven't voted or dropped off your ballot, today is the day. You know, I haven't been on Nextdoor in ages. In fact, I thought I sort of muted my account, or I thought I maybe had even got rid of it. But they just bring you back in. They send stuff saying, your neighbors are saying stuff. And you're thinking, do I dare? And I dared, and I suffered the consequences. Not really suffered, but just another realization that, I don't know, the people with the loudest voices seem to be a lot of Nazis. Yeah, it's a cesspool of Nazis. You know, the American maggot kind. It has the deplorable stench, like what the Supreme Court stinks like now. Yeah, Sotomayor said it would have a stench, and it does. It's a very deplorable stench. No one can stand it. That's how deplorable it is. So yeah, Nextdoor, the conservative, they call themselves conservatives. I call them Nazis for short, because it's, you know, like 2 syllables, Nazi, rather than, you know, conservative. Yeah, it's too many syllables. They don't deserve the recognition of polysyllabic, okay? Something a little less. So, Nazis for short. And that's exactly what they're doing. They got their burgermeisters. They got their heads of industry. All the deep, dark money that they can have. They even have captured the judiciary. Thank you, Federalist Society and Heritage Foundation. Whose heritage? The Black Forest Teutonic kind, huh? Ja, nein. Yeah. All right. I guess we're going to be seeing duh now, but that's for another day. Putin may have a blood disease. Maybe somebody gave him some polonium. Has anyone considered that? You know, turnabout is fair play, apparently, over there. Jeez. You think it was bad now? Think what happened if you got on the wrong side of Catherine the Great. Jeez. Yeah, I mean, she wasn't just a sex kitten. Nope. She was actually quite a formidable character herself. Maybe a little bit more cultured and refined than Vlad. But I'm just saying. Turnabout is fair play. I don't know what the anecdote in Russia is for that, but, they say that Vlad's sick. I notice that he's not offering or even being asked to move any pianos that he doesn't own with a crane into a 5-story window at a condo he doesn't own. That seems to be going around. So, but as far as I can tell, he's been avoiding that one. Blood disease? Yeah, could be polonium poisoning. You never know. I think a few people are a little upset. I mean, if you've got, military advisors going on their state TV talking about what a foobar, that's a nice way of saying it, that Ukraine has become, whose fault is that? And how is that guy actually able to say that and live? My understanding is that when anybody stands up on state TV and says something, a little contrary to what Vlad has determined is the state message for that day, well, you could, you could be, asked to go home forever and ever and ever. What happened to that lady that held the sign up? We haven't heard about her for a while. And, they put her in some gulag somewhere. What's happening to her? At least we got to hear about Pussy Riot when they were incarcerated for a couple of years. I think they memory hold that lady. All right. Well, we could have that happening here. What is going on in Idaho? Well, I'll tell you what's going on in Idaho. They want to move the state capital to Moscow, instead of Boise, because there is a Moscow, Idaho, and they're going to move it there. Yeah, Joan McCarter, 4th generation Idahoan, sold the farm and is moving to Oregon to get away from Idaho because it's gotten too extreme. And the reason for it is that the more extreme Nazi elements of the Republican Party are actually causing the more so-called moderates, and I got to tell you, they're not moderates, okay? I think they're sort of like the offspring of Weaver, and these Nazi extremists in Idaho are even more extreme than Jeff Weaver. Ruby Ridge. So, I guess it's pretty darn unsafe for those who are like the real enemy, and that would be us. The real enemy. And yet, we are so hesitant to acknowledge that that's what is happening, and we can't ever allow ourselves to say, yeah, well, they're the enemy. We're still trying to say that they're just good neighbors. Well, I will have to say that it felt good on Nextdoor to call my neighbors seditious, insurgent, anti-American Nazis. It felt good. And I actually had a few likes for it too. So I'm not alone, fortunately. Okay, they got a lot of guns, though, and they don't care. Yeah, I'm going to give my kid who had a mental health evaluation for terrorist threats from the FBI or local constabulary, I'm going to get him some body armor, about 1,000 rounds of ammo. And here, go buy the gun of your choice, dear son. Upstate New York. They are pretty white supremacist up there, I got to tell you. Okay. It's not like being down in Times Square. No, not at all. So, not unusual. And that's the way it goes, I guess. We have to live with this. We have to make comedy. We got to break bread. No, you don't negotiate with Nazis. Nope. In fact, I don't know. Maybe my joke about the gated communities are already built. Yada, yada, yada. Let's just put them all in their gated communities, or all those people, who would probably want to live in a gated community. Maybe they would call it a compound, a gated compound, just to make them happy. They got their little guard shacks. They got their, strip malls. I said this yesterday, They got their franchise churches in the strip mall. Okay. Even their Chick-fil-A anti-choice, I don't know, what are they, maple fries? I can't remember what it is. They got all that, all the stuff that they love. And turn the guard checks around, lock them in. They won't know what hit them. They won't. Maybe shut off Fox, and you'll notice a drastic decrease in insanity. And I am not kidding. I'm not being hyperbolic. I'm not putting down insane people now. Please. But it has already been shown that, you don't even have to wean them. Cold turkey for 30 to 40 hours. And they start to turn around and going, whoa, I was like one of those pod people. I believed all of that. Okay. Since they want to go after immigrants, why can't we just go after the Murdochs? If we're going to be going after immigrants, why don't we go after the Murdochs? Why should they have any due process? We have an article, a story about SCOTUS doing just that. Oh, you're an immigrant? You don't get any due process. You're deported. My God. Yeah, well, we don't need any more Nazis in office passing the enabling acts. All right? We need to purge all of these Nazis. We need to purge all of these insurgents. We need to purge, I dare say, anybody appointed during Trump's tenure should not be in any form of government whatsoever. Do you think what's going on in Idaho is not being backed by some hostile foreign power by the name of Vlad? Please. We already have, assets who have been working in the secessionist movement in the region, and they hightailed it back to Russia when the, hammer came down. Our hammer. Let's go bear hunting. Yeah, Russian bear. He and his little Russian wife got out of here. The Americans. Okay. We better start making ourselves... I know I'm preaching to the choir. I apologize. I should probably get off this jag because I'm making it sound like, there's somebody out there that might, who doesn't already know, who might agree with us, because they're never going to agree until we cut them off of Fox. Which also makes me wonder, why is that allowed on any military base? If you got Tucker Carlson pushing the Great Replacement Theory, you would think that would hurt military morale. Yeah, man. Boy, if I was Philosopher King, that wouldn't be allowed. We got to do something about that. I'm serious. Do they have mullahs broadcasting their ideas to a certain segment of the military on our bases? I don't think so. It's the same effing thing. And I know I'm preaching to the choir, but tell your friends. Maybe they'll tell their friends. And on and on and on. Well, what's on the rest of the menu here as we start in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? I could blame this being on Monday, but it's not. It's Tuesday. I should have my my mouth all in order by now, but there it goes. Yes, at the top, Fox News has blood on its hands. And it isn't by accident. There's a reason for this. Massive unrest and turmoil, and what? Oh, yeah, I'm gonna be my little Hitler Nazi and come in here and say I can save everything. Only I can fix it. Yeah, right. We've been through that before, and you know what? We're going to punch you again. Keep punching the Nazis, please. On the rest of the menu, speaking of which, the America First majority on the Supreme Court made it more difficult for federal courts to review the factual determinations of a case before an immigrant is deported. They can't even look to see if the poor guy was brought up on bogus charges. You're out of here. No due process for you. That goes totally against everything that we have in this country. When you're a tourist, you expect that if you get bopped on the head and die, someone might be held to account. Rogue nation. And we're being rotted from within. Let's continue. In a 63 ruling, that same Supreme Court struck down another limit on political corruption in the McCain-Feingold Act. Yeah. You can raise any amount of money you want. You can loan yourself some money, and then you can make interest on that money, and then you can pay yourself back after the election's over. Yeah. Which means, I guess, deep, dark, hostile foreign power money is allowed to come in. Because apparently it's a First Amendment right to take money from hostile foreign powers. I don't know how that works, but this is the SCOTUS that we have. And a confidential workplace survey conducted for the D.C. Federal Trial and Appeals Court detailed profound instances of gender discrimination, bullying, and racial insensitivity. No wonder the Supreme Court is the way it is. After the break, we move to the chef's table where a Russian ransomware gang has threatened to overthrow the Costa Rican government. You know, that's coming to a representative democracy near you. And me too. And Macron named Elisabeth Borne as France's new prime minister, only the second woman in history to hold the post. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. Little reminder, Kelly's going to be at Netroots Nation this year, so stay tuned for that. We're looking forward to it. If you would now look across the page near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com to the left from the chat room link, you will then notice the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, and if you could afford, even in these perilous inflationary times, soon to be a depression near you too, well, let's hope that doesn't happen. But anyway, all kidding aside, if you could afford to send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink once a month, the accumulation of those funds help us pay our bills. And I hate to admit it, but, we're all, temporarily embarrassed billionaires. Yeah, sure we are. Anyway, we do need some help paying our bills, and thank you for being so generous in doing so over these many years to those of you who have. And if you out there who are not doing so, if you might consider it, it would be great. Thank you. Anyway, once again, we need the money. Bills keep going up. Alrighty. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and thanks, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam, and I'll tell you why you should follow me there, because I post the show notes and links diary. I know they're trying to make them stories, but they're diaries. I post the show notes and links there on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime. And then I really scramble to try to get those show notes and links linked up on Twitter and other social media platforms. So if you followed me on Twitter at Justice Putnam, you'll get those show notes and links. Because that's where the real reportage is. Okay. If you would like to follow the show on Twitter, you can do so at Cookbook West. And pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. I know you can even get them on Spotify, but, we're not going to allow them to co-opt everything now, are we? No. Also, you can pick up the Deep State Archive of the Netroots Radio Library at the Internet Archive at archive.org. And West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is there too. Okay, let's let us now tuck into this first offering here that's been set down so deftly onto this table here in the salon that we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And we are in the Bistro Cafe part, so save some room. We always do the amuse-bouche at the end. You know? I know it's supposed to be at the beginning, but we do it at the end, and that's at the chef's table, so save a little bit of room for that coming up. All right, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. It's Super Tuesdays. If you haven't dropped off your ballot, do it today. Or if you need to stand in line to vote, I don't know, bring your own food and water, I guess. Is that still allowed? Probably not. You can't even have a drink of water while we make you stand out in, blazing heat. I guess they don't want us to vote. I wonder what they think is wrong. Well, we'll find out, won't we? Go vote. Okay, the Supreme Court yesterday made it more difficult for federal courts to review the factual determinations that can lead to the deportation of non-citizens. The technical ruling split the court 5-4, with Justice Amy Coney Barrett writing the majority opinion, and fellow conservative Justice Neil Gorsuch joining liberal justices in dissent. Barrett and the majority went further than the federal government had advocated, and I guess that was the federal government still working for Trump. She said that while Congress had granted the Attorney General room for mercy in providing relief to those who had entered the country illegally, it was different for judicial intervention. Two things. They always say illegal. What do you mean illegal? You mean parking ticket illegal? Or shooting up a black supermarket in Buffalo, New York illegal? All right, let's be clear about what they're talking about here. Great replacement now, isn't it? Federal courts have a very limited role to play in this process, wrote Barrett. With an exception for legal and constitutional questions, Congress has barred judicial review of the Attorney General's decisions denying discretionary relief from removal. We must decide how far this bar extends, specifically whether it precludes judicial review of factual findings that underlie a denial of relief. It does. Really? Barrett was joined by Roberts, Thomas, Alito, and Kavanaugh. Gorsuch responded with a dissent that was longer than the court's opinion. Today, the court holds that a federal bureaucracy can make an obvious factual error, one that will result in an individual's removal from this country, and nothing can be done about it, Gorsuch wrote. No court may even hear the case. It is a bold claim promising dire consequences for countless lawful immigrants. You see what they're doing here? He was joined by liberal justices Breyer, Sotomayor, and Elena Kagan. Now, the case involved, I'm not going to try to pronounce this person's first name, but his last name is Patel, and his wife, who entered the country illegally in the 90s. What do they mean by illegal? Overstayed a student visa. In 2007, Patel applied to the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, a part of the Department of Homeland Security, for a green card. But while his proceedings were pending, he also applied for a Georgia's driver's license, and on the application checked a box that he was a U.S. citizen. Charges against him for filing a false statement were dropped, but DHS later commenced removal proceedings. An immigration judge did not believe Patel's explanation that he checked the box by mistake. The Board of Immigration Appeals upheld the judge's decision. Patel took his case to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit, but it ruled that it did not have jurisdiction to review factual findings of the immigration judges. Really? Even though the Justice Department said it believed the law gave the judiciary leeway to review some factual determinations, Barrett wrote that Congress was clear. The government's and Patel's arguments read like elaborate efforts to avoid the most natural meaning of the text. She wrote, natural meaning. You know, the natural meaning of what it means to be white and not replaced. I'm going to keep on that. I'm just going to do it. Gorsuch said Patel was entitled to a driver's license without being a citizen, so checking the box could have been unintentional. In such cases, he said the federal judiciary has a role to play because that's exactly what they're supposed to do here. You're supposed to have due process to determine whether an actual mistake was made. Oh no, not for you. You're not of the right hue. Sometimes a bureaucratic mistake can have life-changing consequences, Gorsuch wrote. Our case is such a case. An immigrant to this country applied for legal residency. The government rejected his application. Allegedly, the government did so based on a glaring factual error. In circumstances like that, our law has long permitted individuals to petition a court to consider the question and correct any mistake. Again brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. The Supreme Court split along ideological lines in striking another campaign finance restriction, agreeing with Ted Cruz's challenge to federal limits on the use of post-election contributions to repay a candidate's loan to his campaign. It was the latest Supreme Court decision to knock out a part of the landmark 2002 Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, popularly known as the McCain-Feingold Act, and reemphasize the court's view that many restrictions on campaign finance are unconstitutional violations of the First Amendment's protection of political speech. They want to keep putting more money into our elections, even though, I got to tell you, if you want to go by original intent, the original intent of the founders, George Washington, all of them, no political parties. You don't hear about that. No, what we hear is allowing hostile foreign powers to buy off a political party and destroy the United States of America and representative democracy from within. Few issues, along with related laws regarding voting rights, divide the court's conservative and liberal so cleanly. The 6-3 ruling, featuring the dueling opinions of Roberts and Kagan, provided only the latest example. The government has not shown that the law furthers a permissible anti-corruption goal, rather than the impermissible objective of simply limiting the amount of money in politics, as if there's something bad about that, Bob. Or John. Roberts. I don't know. We're going to call him John Bob. Of course, he was joined by Alito, Thomas, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett. The result was expected after arguments in the case brought by Cruz, and Roberts said it was simply a logical progression in cases including one of his most controversial, Citizens United versus the FEC. There it is right there. We're going to subvert representative democracy and make it a law. The court has recognized only one permissible ground for restricting political speech to the prevention of quid pro quo corruption or its appearance. We have consistently rejected attempts to restrict campaign speech based on other legislative aims. What? For example, we have denied attempts to reduce the amount of money in politics, to level electoral opportunities by equalizing candidate resources, and to limit the general influence a contributor may have over an elected official, he wrote. However, well-intentioned such proposals may be, the First Amendment, as this court has repeatedly emphasized, prohibits such attempts to tamper with the, quote, right of citizens to choose who shall govern them, end quote. The quote is from one of the previous cases. Kagan said no one should have been different. Kagan said this one should have been different because post-election contributions to a winning candidate to pay off a personal loan carry unique corruption risks. All the money does is enrich the candidate personally at a time when he can return the favor by a vote, a contract, an appointment, she wrote in dissent, joined by Justices Breyer and Sotomayor. It takes no political genius to see the heightened risk of corruption, the danger of I'll make you richer and you'll make me richer arrangements between donors and office holders, she continued. The case involved a somewhat obscure portion of McCain-Feingold. It caps at $250,000, the amount federal candidates can raise and use after an election to repay personal loans. Cruz, in his 2018 Senate re-election campaign against Beto O'Rourke, that Roberts noted was the most expensive in history, lent his campaign $260,000 the day before the general election. $10,000 more than the limit. The government tried to have the case thrown out, saying Cruz's injury was self-inflicted. He chose the amount to exceed the limits for a test, and his campaign had on hand $2.2 million raised before the election that could have been used to fully repay the loan. He was judge shopping. He was court shopping. And he got the Supreme Court that he wanted with the judges he needed. Because he's a pawn in the game, too, you know. A panel of judges that heard the suit unanimously disagreed. The flaw in the government's argument, they said, is that it would require Cruz to avoid an injury by subjecting himself to the very framework he alleges is unconstitutional. Roberts and the majority also agreed with the panel on the merits. Roberts wrote that even the government seemed to agree the provision burdens candidates who wish to make expenditures on behalf of their own candidacy through personal loans. Now, Kagan rejected on a point-by-point basis, starting with how the post-election contributions are different. At that point, she wrote, both candidate and donor know what they are getting. The candidate is deeply grateful because his personal wealth is affected, and the donors know as they paid him, so he will pay them. In the coming months and years, they receive government benefits, maybe favorable legislation, maybe prized appointments, maybe lucrative contracts, she wrote. The politician is happy. The donors are happy. The only loser is the public. It inevitably suffers from government corruption. Washington Post brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. One federal appeals court judge in D.C. has hired only male law clerks for the past 2 decades. Another judge allegedly refused to speak to a staffer for weeks after a child care emergency caused the assistant to depart work early one day. Others are said to have reduced their employees to tears by yelling or making cruel comments about the quality of their work. These and other complaints appear in a confidential workplace survey conducted for the Federal Trial and Appeals Court in the nation's capital, an institution regarded as a stepping stone to the Supreme Court. It details instances of gender discrimination, bullying, and racial insensitivity, while underscoring the stark contrast in the power imbalance between judges with life tenure and the assistants who depend on them for career advancement. In the survey, a copy of which was obtained by the Washington Post, and in related interviews, current and former courthouse employees who acknowledged having witnessed misconduct described their reluctance to file formal complaints against their superiors. They cited fears of retaliation and distrust that the federal judiciary system for workplace accountability, which tasks judges with policing one another, ultimately would resolve their concerns. There is no point to reporting, said one survey respondent, because discipline is non-existent. Let's shine a light. All right, let's also get to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is an important message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. After a storm or disaster, it's important to eat only safe food. Throw away perishables like meat, poultry, fish, eggs, and leftovers stored above 40 degrees Fahrenheit for 2 hours or more. Throw away food with an unusual odor, color, or texture. Throw away food that may have come in contact with floodwater, including food in swollen, punctured, and damaged cans. When in doubt, throw it out.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. As a soldier, George Washington demonstrated enough courage and decisiveness to become the commander of the Virginia troops that defended the state's western frontier during the French and Indian War. He also established himself as a successful tobacco planter at the family plantation, Mount Vernon, married Martha Dandridge Custis, and won election to the Virginia House of Burgesses. Washington had nothing to gain from the American Revolution, at least in a material sense. He had achieved both wealth and fame as a British subject in colonial Virginia. Yet he was among the first to raise the possibility of armed resistance and accepted command of the Continental Army. He served for the 8.5 years of the Revolution without pay. Though his army was inexperienced, often outnumbered, and poorly supplied, Washington was able to avoid defeat, wear down the British forces, and eventually achieve victory. With independence secured in 1783 by a peace treaty with Britain, Washington appeared before Congress and publicly resigned his military position, returning to Mount Vernon a private citizen of the new nation. That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
If and when the Supreme Court reverses Roe, who will suffer? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. And the list of who will suffer is a long list that includes victims of rape, victims of incest, victims of domestic violence, teenagers, low-income workers, women of color, immigrants without documents, really all members of marginalized groups. In contrast, for the wealthy, the right to choose will, for the most part, remain relatively intact. They will be able to access that health care. They will have the wherewithal to travel. That's obviously not the case for women who literally can't afford to miss work, for single moms who can't leave their kids, for women who don't have money to travel and live in a state that has criminalized buying abortion pills. What are they to do? Studies show that women unable to access abortion disproportionately are women of color, who, denied an abortion, are much more likely to live in poverty, be unemployed, and be unable to escape violent male partners. In addition, a nationwide abortion ban, one study shows, would increase pregnancy-related deaths by 21%, 33% among black women, who already are 2.5 times more likely to die in childbirth than white women. Which means that overruling Roe may well initiate a death spiral for women, as well as a potential death spiral for constitutional rights. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU, because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1838. The second anti-slavery convention of American women was being held in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. For a while, a group of anti-slavery abolitionists had had difficulty finding a venue in the city willing to host their convention. Discouraged by their plight, they had decided to build their own facilities. They raised money, built, and christened their new building Pennsylvania Hall. It opened on May 14th, and just 4 days later, a pro-slavery mob circled the new hall. Alarmed by the unrest, the mayor of Philadelphia convinced the abolitionists to move their meeting away from Pennsylvania Hall. The angry mob burned Pennsylvania Hall to the ground. One observer noted, describing the scene, flames burst in rolling masses from the windows. Soon the whole building was enveloped in one dense, dark-colored sheet of flame. Undeterred by the violence, the abolitionist women moved their meeting to a large private home. One of those scheduled to speak was Sarah T. Smith. Her eloquent words stood in stark contrast to the ugliness that took place at Pennsylvania Hall. She began her speech by saying, "We are told that it is not within the province of women to discuss the subject of slavery, that it is a political question, and we are stepping out of our sphere when we take part in its discussion. It is not true that it is merely a political question. It is likewise a question of justice, of humanity, of morality, of religion." She went on to say it was a matter of whether the laborer shall receive the reward of his labor or be driven by unrequited toil. In the end, those who lit the fire that reduced Pennsylvania Hall to ashes could not quell the fire for justice that was lit by the abolitionists' cause.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 55 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high in the mid-70s or maybe a tad warmer. And we will be having somewhat great weather, but we are now going to jump right into weather from around the world, which is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 78 degrees and sunny. Paris is 83 and sunny. Rome is 82 and fair. Kyiv is 61 and fair. Kabul is 68 and clear. Hong Kong is 71 degrees and fair. Tokyo is 60 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 60 and clear. San Francisco, California is 53 degrees and sunny. And New York is 71 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Javier Cordova of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A ransomware gang that infiltrated some Costa Rican government computer systems has upped its threat, saying its goal is now to overthrow the government. Perhaps seizing on the fact that President Rodrigo Chavez had only been in office for a week, the Russian-speaking Conti gang tried to increase the pressure to pay a ransom by raising its demand to $20 million. "We have insiders in your government," the group said. "We are also working on gaining access to your other systems. You have no other options but to pay us. We know that you have hired a data recovery specialist. Do not try to find workarounds." Chavez declared a state of emergency over the attack as soon as he was sworn in last week. The U.S. State Department offered a $10 million reward for information leading to the identification or location of Conti leaders. And Conti responded by writing, "We are determined to overthrow the government by means of a cyber attack. We have already shown you all the strength and power. You have introduced an emergency." The gang also said it was raising the ransom demand to $20 million, and it called on Costa Ricans to pressure their government to pay.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Sylvie Corbet and Thomas Adamson of the Associated Press bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Centrist politician Elisabeth Borne was appointed France's new prime minister on Monday yesterday, becoming only the second woman in history to hold the post. Borne, age 61, the labor minister in Macron's previous government, succeeds Jean Castex, whose resignation yesterday was expected after Macron's re-election last month to a second 5-year term. Macron's choice of Borne was criticized by some left-wing politicians and their supporters. Firebrand far-left leader Jean-Luc Mélenchon said her appointment marks a new season of social and ecological mistreatment, claiming that her legacy amounted to a reduction in the allowances of 1 million unemployed people. Sounds like we have a Thatcher on our hands, indeed. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin l'âge tombe, nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. De novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin l'âge tombe, nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.